team. In the same way that there are private leagues in soccer and that draw from kids at all of the schools, I think that we can't leave kids out if we can possibly include them. I think especially kids that want to participate and want to be part of a bigger program when they go to a small school. I just would really like to give kids that opportunity if they want to take us up on it. Because I think we have a lot of good programs and I think we have a lot of great sports. And I would like to share that with anybody who wants to be part of it.
Thank you, Diane. Yeah, it's tough because one of the things I could say is that if you chose to go to a private school, there are many advantages, but there are some disadvantages. You don't have big sports teams at this school, but that's a choice you've made. But Diane and others have made a compelling argument also.
I'd like to know, where do we know that these students who are asking to do this, are they from Massachusetts? Are they from other districts in other states that have football, and they've chosen to go to Waldorf knowing it doesn't have football versus staying where they are where they could have football? So to me, that's a question. Where are they coming from? I understand in one situation or in one sense that the kids are in the middle of this, but then on the other hand, I think they made a decision to come to Waldorf knowing that that was a situation. And I just worry about the repercussions of this for down the road. So we do this for this one sport. Now do we start getting into doing it for other sports that Waldorf doesn't have? And that could lead to potential problems that I pointed out. I disagree with Carl. I think the situation is comparable in a way.
Point of clarification.
Yes.
Okay, so to be clear, when Waldorf approached us, they didn't approach us just specifically for football. They approached us to co-op in sports. And the reason that football is on the table is because the rules around co-op, and Carl, you can jump in if you have more information to add. The rules around co-op for us are that we would only co-op with a team and can only co-op with a team if our team needs numbers. And so football is the only sport that we can actually make this proposal. And that's why this proposal is in front of you. If you approve it, there's still another step in this process, and that is that we have to go to the new league that was formed, the Pioneer Valley League that we are not part of. Well, it's not Pioneer Valley, it's just one. And they also have to give approval even if you approve it. So this is just a piece of the process for co-op. And I don't know if Carl can say anything else.
No, and the other piece is it's not a lifetime agreement. These things go before the league every year or every 2 years, and it's voted on. And Christy's right. Football was the only sport where it applied by the co-op rule, where host school needs players, and there are kids that are interested in joining as guests. So that's why we only looked at football.
You know how many students want to join football?
I think they've got 3 or 4. Yep.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second. Any other discussion?
Yeah.
Pete, go ahead.
Oh, just that they would have to fulfill whatever requirements we have around COVID or any other health concerns.
Yes.
As well as user fees, concussion testing.
We're not waiving anything by accepting that. That's correct.
So this is
a good
for,
point, Ann.
and this is for next year. Next year's football program.
Yeah, because there's 2 weeks left of this year.
We would take it to the league this winter for approval for next fall.
And just 2 other clarifying things. The Waldorf school went through their part of the process with the MIAA. So from an MIA perspective, they're approved to ask us to do this. But then whether this gets approved has to go back to the local division. Steve, just one other thing.
I have a question. What is the grading system? What is the grading system and policy at the Waldorf High School?
Rich, can you state that again?
He's asking what the.
What is the grading system and policy at the Waldorf High School? How do they grade? On what type of scale? How often are their grades entered and reported?
Yeah, so this is interesting. So I think, and I can't speak to this in explicit detail, I think they do narrative grades, but what you're referencing is what's in our policy book around.
They can't satisfy our academic requirements with their grading policy. And it's unfair to have our kids have to meet certain rigorous academic requirements that are graded on an objective scale to qualify for sports. And every year we have kids who miss to then and kids who are not subject to that same scale.
I hear what you're saying, and I don't know if that's overreach, because they have a internal set of procedures and policies, and is their obligation just to meet their own standards. So if somebody's unsuccessful there, that's likely documented in some way, and that would make them ineligible. But just because predominantly we use a 0 to 100 grading system, I don't know that we can compel them to do the same.
Aren't we even shifting away from?
Well, we're in the process of that potentially, yeah.
So we have a motion.
There's one last clarifying question. Can you describe the motion so people know what they're voting for?
This is one of those odd motions that if you vote yes, you're voting to decline Waldorf's request to co-op. And if you vote no, you're accepting their request. So it's one of those odd motions where you have to understand which way you're voting.
So what is, Steve, what does actually the motion say? Do we have that?
My motion was to respectfully decline the request from Waldorf School to co-op in our football program.
It wasn't complicated.
Okay, good.
So roll call vote. Ann.
No.
Jason.
Yes.
Bonnie.
Yes.
Molly.
Yes.
Bill.
Yes.
Diane.
No.
Corey.
No.
Rich.
Yes.
And I will vote no. So it is 5-4 that the motion passes, which means we will respectfully decline Waldorf's request to call. So we move ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I got distracted. Okay. So the next thing I have to share, and this is a bit of good news, is our enrollment report, and you have that in front of you. In public schools, our enrollment goes up and down and changes throughout the year, but we use October 1st as the magic number, and enrollment's important just in general. You want to know how many kids we have. And enrollment's also important because of how the assessments happen to our member towns, right? And then those numbers drive the percentages in the eventual assessments. So last year, our enrollment was down a little in the context of COVID. Some people opted out, homeschooled, did a whole host of other things, and it was 1165. This year, as of October 1st, our enrollment's 1,217. I just checked it today, and that's the official number, right? I just checked it today. and it's up 4 more students, so to 1221. It'll likely continue to go up. Maybe it'll dip a little and then go back up. But the 1217 is a 52 student increase from last year, or almost 4.6%. That's quite remarkable because you read in the papers constantly the narrative about declining enrollment in Berkshire County, declining enrollment in Berkshire County. A 4.6 increase is a big deal. That's where we are. There are lots of different versions of this in your packet. Last year was a strange year in that West Stockbridge and Stockbridge had the exact same assessment, and Sharon and I checked our math a dozen times and it looked wrong, but actually happened. This year, West Stockbridge is up a little bit, and Stockbridge is down a little bit. So yeah, so there we go.
Last year, or was it 2 years ago, I think, the tuition out from Farmington River caused us a budgetary problem. Am I correct on that? I remember being at the finance committee meeting, and I think it was last year or the year, a number of students from Farmington River were not coming here. They were going to Lee instead. And it was at the transition where Farmington ends, and then they couldn't go to the middle school.
Correct, right.
Okay.
So
do we know how many students who did that have come back?
It looks like a lot.
yeah,
We're at 86 tuition students
Yeah, I was
this
looking.
year. We're at 73 last year and 80 the year before that. We're at like a 4-year high now. Last year was a historic low, and now we're right back up to a 4 or 5 year high.
Yeah, and the 1 year that we lost a bunch of kids, and ironically, I think it was in part connected to the football program at Lee, that a bunch of Farmington River kids had aspirations of playing football at Lee. Yeah, that's nice that sort of balanced out. Okay.
Peter, just for my own understanding of this, because the last page is the October 1 enrollment summary.
Mm-hmm.
And the 2021 says total all students 1,201.
It includes
21.
tuitioned out. That includes kids who don't go here, right? They tuitioned out.
Right.
That's where that
It's
number.
all the kids
Yeah.
in the district, but not all the kids in the school.
Right. So on the surface, it sounds like the growth I'm talking about didn't happen,
Right,
but it did.
I believe it, but it just.
Yeah, no, it looks, the way it's presented is a little confusing. Okay, any other questions? So I'm really happy about this. We've seen some people move into the community. Great Barrington's overall population is up quite a bit. Some of those people are school age, so they're not all going to public schools. Some of them are going to private or independent schools. And the principals have done a good job of continuing to accept choice students throughout the year. Just today, we got 2 more who are moving from another state. So I think it's good, and I think people vote with their feet, and we have folks coming to our schools, obviously from our own communities, but also from many surrounding communities, and I think that really speaks well to what's going on in our schools, what teachers and paras and principals are doing. So.
Do we talk to the families that have opted to tuition out to find out why?
We've not done that in a while, and it's I think the tuition out are largely special education placements. I think what you're talking about are people who are choicing into other communities. Several years ago, we did a survey. We've not done one recently. On the list of all our priorities, it's sort of mid to low, but that's something that maybe we should do it every 3 years to see what's going on. It's a little challenging to track down all the folks, but we can try to do it. And sometimes we know as people are leaving, so we don't have to do another contact, right? Somebody's moving that has, like, this is what it is. Somebody's sending their kid to Miss Halls because they got a great scholarship and it's a neat opportunity. But then there are other ones, like, I'm frustrated with the relationships with staff and getting out of here. That would be worth knowing, right? Or there's a pattern of bullying in a particular grade, right? That would be another good one to know about.
Well, it has only 26 kids this year. That's tuitioned out.
No,
tuition out is largely special education.
Oh, that's right.
Right. So it would be the choice students. So
Is that listed on here?
No, we don't get that report for the year until December.
There is also kids with depression.
yeah.
Peter,
Yeah, Rich, go ahead.
No, I mean, we talked about the tuition numbers, but the tuition in numbers are going up dramatically too over the last 4 years. Do you have any sense as to what if there are any trends in where those kids are coming from? And we have 20 more kids this year. We had 20 more kids the year before, and 20 more kids. I mean, we're like almost up 100 kids over 4 years.
Yeah.
Like, where are the kids that are coming in? I know we've had kids in school choice, but the new kids are coming in. Where are they coming from? Is there any specific trends?
Well, I mean, the tuition kids obviously come from Richmond, Otis, and Sandusky.
No, I'm talking about the school choice.
Yeah, so we'll share. We don't have that report right now, right? Because it gets run against this other stuff, but we'll share it in maybe 2 meetings. Lots from the 5 towns south of us, right? From what composes Southern Berkshire. So lots from each of their member towns. Lots from Lee, some from Lenox, some from Pittsfield, and that's really the bulk of it. We have in the past had students from Williamstown. It's a pretty drive, but it's a long drive to Williamstown. We've had people from Tolland,
Southfield.
Southfield. Yeah, so Southfield, and they're like hamlets of the 5 towns south of us. But
in the meeting in December, you'll share it all.
yeah, we'll look at it.
That's fair.
There's data
We've got
here.
Yeah, it's right on the second page.
On the second page.
Means we leave with 60.
Yeah.
But you don't have the out numbers because that's not available yet.
Correct.
Yeah, correct.
That's right.
That really tells the whole picture.
Right, yeah.
Right, so
When we get
Richard.
into December.
Oh, I missed that. No, I see it. Yeah. But I guess my specific question was not just the totals. Is we seem to be having this big increase over the last couple of years in school, or a steady increase every year. Like, is that increase representing coming from a certain place? I can talk to you offline with Sharon or Peter if there's a way to call that out or not.
Yeah, we can look at it. I mean, what's been interesting, and I know Richmond intimately because I work there too, their numbers had dipped for a while. Last year's class was bigger. The next few classes are going to be a little smaller. And the Richmond students really choose between Monument, Lenox, and the 2 schools in Pittsfield. But I think for the people who don't have this in front of them, I'll just, the biggest one is Lee. So 60 total students are coming from Lee, 34 from Egremont, 37 from Pittsfield, 20 from Sheffield, and then I think the balance, oh, and this one, sorry.
33 from Mill River.
Yeah, 33 from Mill River, 14 from New Marlboro, and then most of the rest of the communities are each in the 10 or fewer range. Okay.
It's Monterey, not Mill River.
Yeah, it's Monterey.
Monterey is.
Monterey. Sorry, yeah, you should do it with a ruler.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's where we are on that. That's generally good news. Let me shift now, unless there are any more questions about that, to COVID-19 and tell you a little bit about what's going on there. So the 7-day case count per 100,000 is 236. That's going in the wrong direction, right? So maybe the last meeting, it was 160. So it's up 18%. Wear your mask, get vaccinated, and wash your hands, right? The positivity rate is 3.6, which is high, but the infection rate, I think, is 1.1%, and sort of, as Ann and I went through a million times last year, below 1 is where you want to be. So we've got some work to do. We're waiting on this week's pool testing, and probably Becky Donovan's on the call, and we'll announce it in a second. But we had a few positive cases this week at the elementary school. I think there were 2 at the high school. There was 1, and we'll see the rest of the results shortly. So we continue to do our work on this. I think since we last met, the commissioner announced that the mask mandate is continuing through January 15th after the winter break and the holidays. And we had that whole big conversation about if you hit the 80% threshold, you could stop wearing masks. If we ask the commissioner to do it, and then if you voted to do it, we've hit that threshold at the high school, but the requirement is for vaccinated people to not, or if you go down that path of not wearing masks, unvaccinated people need to continue to wear masks. And from a separation enforcement management thing, that's a nightmare. And I'd rather everybody wear masks till we got to a threshold where we didn't have to wear masks than to just have the 20 or 10% of people not wear masks. So that's what's going on with that. Any questions about COVID itself? Okay, so now let me move on to the vaccine mandate. And even since I pulled together this information, it's changed a little bit. As I understand it, and I shared this in the packet, there are really 2 approaches, and one approach is what the Cambridge schools did, and another approach is what the Amherst schools did, and then there's like the Belchertown approach, which is sort of in the middle. So what they did in Cambridge was the school committee itself made a motion that all age-eligible students must be vaccinated, but failure to be vaccinated won't result in exclusion from school. And this is sort of the right versus the opportunity argument, and schools are right, so they clearly got legal advice to not exclude anybody from school, because it's setting yourself up for a lawsuit, right? But the second part of it is, if unvaccinated students, will not be allowed, or it's sort of this funny negative thing, no unvaccinated students will be allowed to participate in athletics, clubs, intramural sports, student government, after school, visual and performing arts, all school clubs that meet of the day, or school sponsored events, right? And this is in some ways similar to our first step around pool testing. So that's one approach, and that's actually the one that I would favor or recommend. The second approach is really interesting, and this is what they did in Amherst. And while the schools did this, the driving force on this one was the Amherst Department of Public Health. So the Amherst Department of Public Health added the COVID vaccination to the list of mandatory vaccines that all students get in that community. So actually, the school committee didn't vote to do it. The Department of Public Health did. And that's a really interesting way to do it. I reached out to, because the schools, we're in Stockbridge now, the schools sit in Great Barrington. I reached out to the health agent, and then I reached out to the chair of the Board of Health in Great Barrington, had a really nice conversation with him. He was very thoughtful and invited us, or some number of us, to a Great Barrington, they're meeting right now at the same time, but to one of their meetings, or to do a joint meeting or something, and talk about it. Interestingly, many communities, including the Tri-Town, so Stockbridge, Lenox, and Lee, have a mask mandate. So if you go across the street to Elm Street to get a sandwich, you have to wear a mask. But Great Barrington doesn't have a mask mandate, and it appears it's sort of the will of that board to not do that. So I don't know the likelihood of going to the Great Barrington Board of Health and getting them to do a vaccine mandate when they've not even done a mask mandate, right? But I'm just speculating. I shouldn't do that. We should have a meeting with them and talk to them about it. Okay? So these are two possibilities. I think what Belchertown did, which is sort of in the middle, is they just said, if you want to participate in extracurriculars or do anything, you need to be vaccinated. So one other thing that's important, we learned today, and I'll be sending out a note tomorrow, that vaccine clinics for the 5 to 11-year-olds are going to start next week at Du Bois. So one will be on the first one will be at Du Bois on the 13th of November, followed by another one on the 4th of December. We don't know the timing for that yet. That's still being worked out. And apparently people are able to get vaccinated now at several other sites, hospitals, pediatrician offices, and other things. So just more information as you potentially might move to this. And I think that's why the language is all eligible students must be vaccinated. So we don't have a lot of them, but we do have some 3 and 4-year-olds, and in the current structure, they would not be eligible, but everybody 5 and up is now eligible.
It would be my recommendation that this be referred to the policy subcommittee to come back with a recommendation. That would be the committee that would do policy here. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that we're going to get this done right away anyways. because I think public input's important.
Yeah, no, agreed. And I shared these two because that
And I appreciate that.
when you asked last.
Yeah, right, I'm not implying that you were trying to get us to vote tonight, but
No,
I
no,
think
no.
we should go to policy. Yeah.
Currently, the requirements that kids have, getting shots and measles and stuff, is a state requirement.
No, that's in our policies.
I think it's both. So I think it's a state requirement that's backstopped by the local board of health and our own policies.
Because kids can be excluded from school for not having immunization, I believe.
I think Massachusetts is known for the huge loophole of the religious exemption, and many people use that, and I think there's a strong effort to narrow that.
Right, but their families don't know that have had their kids excluded from school because they didn't have immunization records. They had to find out where they had to be re-immunized.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been used as a reason for kids to not attend school. I don't know where that authority came, is that a state authority, is that like, is it a school committee authority?
Yeah, this is a little new to me, and I can do some more research. And Steve, I like the recommendation of policy going into it. This is another one that is worth talking with the school district's attorney about.
Yeah.
Julian.
Yeah, I had that question as well, but I have two questions. My first one, like procedurally, because this is, I think, the second or third time that this has been on the agenda, right? So I think we can agree that there has been time for public comment, and we have heard none.
I disagree with you.
Okay. I like and I understand sort of the intent to sort of send it to the policy subcommittee. I just wonder, is there a way that there can be a vote of intent tonight by the school committee?
Absolutely not.
Okay,
No,
it would be a prolonged process.
This is a very long process. It's very controversial, and we need to make sure we have everything in order before we take a vote. I'd be more than glad to sit here all night with your school committee and public comment, but I really, this is just scratching the surface. This will be whatever we decide to do. If we decide to do a vaccination mandate, it'll be very controversial among many people. So we really want to make sure we've done our homework. And part of me says, really, this is going to be, could be effective for next school year.
I mean, that's what they did in Los Angeles.
Yes.
They voted to do something, I think, effective September 1 of, what year are we in, 2022? 2022.
Yeah. So, I mean, that may not happen. It may be for the spring, or we may not take any action. But I would say when we make a decision, we will, when we decide to make a decision, the meeting before that will probably have some advertising for public input to make sure that
and send a potential draft policy out 2 weeks in advance with a notice that it's going to be discussed and voted on at such and such date.
And if you remember, school committee does that when the pandemic first hit and there was a lot of controversy, we had 270 some odd people on a Zoom meeting.
Right. No.
So this likely will have that type of attendance at our meeting or something. And I think we need to take this seriously. I think Peter's right. We need to get legal advice. If a school committee member wanted to make a motion tonight, that's possible to do, but I would highly discourage it.
And my second question is, can you just explain the exclusion from school? Because the way I'm reading it is that if it will not result in exclusion from school, they would be able to go to school if not vaccinated and simply not be able to participate in extracurriculars?
Correct, right. And that's this thing that a right to and there's all different language about this, right? But a fair and appropriate public education is a right. So you can't, or the recommendation is you don't exclude people from that. even if they're not vaccinated because it's violating their rights. So you could argue in not being vaccinated, they're impacting their peers.
Well, just to clarify, our current policy, JLCB, says students entering school for the first time, whether kindergarten or through transfer from another school system, will be required to present a physician certificate attesting to immunization against diphtheria, whooping cough, poliotitis, tetanitis, measles, and such other communicable diseases as may be specified from time to time by the Department of Public Health. The only exception to this requirement will be made on receipt of a written statement from a doctor that immunization would not be in the best interest of the child, or by the student's parents or guardian stating that vaccination or immunization is contrary to the religious belief of the student or parent. So to put out there that this is some kind of novel legal or public health thing is just simply false. We are doing this now for a bunch of diseases I've never heard of, while 750,000 people have died in this country from the disease we're talking about. So people gotta buck up and start making decisions, but to couch this in some kind of bureaucratic mystery is misinforming the public.
So a couple of answers to that. One, Rich, thank you, because that tells us it's the Department of Public Health who ultimately requires those immunizations, and we just have a policy.
We voted on the ones that were listed there and said, and other ones that the Department of Health may add to it.
I guarantee you, though, that we will look it up, but state law, I'm sure, from the DBH requires that. But we will do that. The other thing to say is, Rich, we're in novel times, and you know that, and your argument belies the fact that this is a political discussion as well as the safety of our students. And on top of that, what really muddies the water is all of these vaccinations are under what's called an EUA, emergency use authorization. None of the vaccinations that you mentioned are, and that scares the heck out of some people, not me, and that makes it more controversial. And I could argue with you that this vaccine is one of the most tested drugs in the history of the world because of the number of people who've gotten it, but it is still under an EUA.
It does say in the Amherst policy that they are adding it to the list of fully approved by the FDA. So I do believe that it has been fully approved.
It is under an EUA.
I thought for certain ages it was.
No. Pfizer and Moderna are fully approved now.
But it started off under an EUA.
I think the 5 to 12 is still an EUA.
5 to 12 is still an EUA. And that's, it'll eventually come through like the other ones have. But it's just the road that it's taken and the speed that it's come has scared some people.
Corey?
Can you just remind us what happened last year with the flu vaccine?
This is interesting, right? Because initially there was a mandate from the state that everybody be vaccinated, and the nurses worked extraordinarily hard to get that vaccination rate high, and it was way over 90%. And at the last minute, the requirement got waived, and there was some rationale about now we need to focus on COVID and not that, and they backed off on that. So,
And there was no attempt to revisit that this year
By the state. No.
by the state. And do we have any sense that the state is going to move this issue forward?
The mantra that we continue to hear is Massachusetts is about local control and we'll give you guidance, but it's up to the communities. And in many cases, I love and appreciate that. And that there are 351 communities having the same discussion. And we could be talking about learning and people with deeper content knowledge and medical understandings might be able to move this better and more deliberately. Does pain me some?
Yeah,
I do think it's important that when those clinics are set, that there is a ton of publicity through the schools I was really disappointed. There was a flu clinic on Tuesday, and I think lots and lots of parents I've talked to never even knew that it happened. It was at Du Bois.
I'll do, it's funny, I was looking at something today, they put up some street signs in Housatonic, and somebody took a picture of it, and there are like 4 signs in a row. Going forward on this, I will do so much outreach that people will complain about it. Right?
It just shows that the school is behind getting these vaccines and that.
Yeah, I do have a good letter to go tomorrow about the 2 COVID clinics. And then I'll follow up with repeated phone calls.
And another piece would be that there's the adult vaccine, the 12 years and up vaccine available for families. Well, a lot of kids might have turned 12 recently and would be eligible to get they're not going to get the younger kid vaccine, so it would be good to have both vaccines available for all the kids from kindergarten through.
Yeah, it's my understanding that the clinics will have both and try to catch, even if a 7-year-old goes, if a parent or somebody else, an older sibling, could get vaccinated, they'll take care of that.
There's still a lot of ways for 12 and up to get vaccinated. Now, I think part of Anne's point.
There are parents who want it done at the school.
Yeah, but if you want it done at the school, this is your chance. And you're right, there's no reason we can't just advertise the heck out of it and hope that our vaccination rates are very high to begin with.
Well, and the really good news is the 7th through 12th grade rate is above 80% and getting higher. I think what's going to get interesting is what happens over time, right? So most of the youth were vaccinated within the last 5 months, but as people start getting to 7, 8, 9 months, then there's the boosters for them, right?
Well, not yet. Right. They're not recommending boosters for.
Not for everyone.
Right.
Yeah, certainly for some people.
Some of us older folks. Right?
Yeah, but not for school. Yes, some teachers, some school attorneys, but not for 18-year-olds.
Right. Okay, so we refer to policy, we'll schedule a policy meeting between now and our next school committee meeting. And hopefully out of that, we also reach out in some way to the Great Barrington Department of Public Health.
Yeah, I would hope we're able to come back to everyone's point with some sort of policy by the December meetings. And then we can have a good discussion about it.
Right, but I don't see us voting on anything at the next meeting in 2 weeks. But maybe we have a draft to share and then a whole giant public invite notification.
Right.
And then we plan a light agenda where we talk about it.
I mean, we could have a public discussion now, but I think it's better to have one based on a policy than the policy subcommittees recommend.
Can we set it? This may be one of those things that warrants like its own standalone meeting, which we've done on some like real important things before.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just wondering if we can sort of put some sort of timeline in place and set a date sometime into December that we will hold a public hearing based on this with the hope of having a policy for then and a vote.
You're gonna think I'm a grumpy old man. I like the idea, but having any sort of public meeting in the last 2 weeks of December is opening yourselves up to problems because everyone's either away or celebrating the holidays and you don't get a representation, but we can try.
Yeah, I mean, if they care so much about vaccines, I would hope that they put their vacation plans aside.
Well, we are Zooming, so you can Zoom anywhere in the world. That is a good point.
You know, maybe, Peter, something would be helpful. I know you've explained it many times before, but explain how vaccinated kids are treated as opposed to unvaccinated kids when they find themselves in a close contact or a pool testing situation.
Yeah, and again, like, I should have my little memo about this so I can articulate it perfectly, but, and principals weigh in on this if I misstep. If somebody's vaccinated and they're perceived to be a close contact, then they're able, if they're asymptomatic, to participate in the test and stay protocol, so they can still attend school and be tested. If somebody is unvaccinated, then and they're perceived to be a close contact, then they're on the path of quarantining for 10 days. Okay, Christy's going to correct me.
So if someone is vaccinated and identified as a close contact, they are informed that they should monitor for symptoms and they proceed as normal. They participate in school and have to be masked. If they are unvaccinated, they are offered the opportunity to participate in test and stay, and they have to come into school, test. If the test is negative and there's no symptoms, they're allowed to stay in school masked. They have to eat lunch in a separate location because when they're unmasked, they have to be socially distanced.
Okay. But in practice, the unvaccinated folks are at risk for at greater risk for a 10-day quarantine than the vaccinated folks. Right. So it's good to be vaccinated because it's good to be vaccinated, and it's also good to be vaccinated because if you have 3 children and it goes through your whole house, your whole family could miss a month of school. Okay. Rich, does that help?
Yeah, I mean, the whole point of the vaccination, one of the major vaccination things is that we know we're going to have COVID around, but it allows things not to get disrupted and it keeps kids in school. Vaccinated kids keep kids in school, which has been the thing we've been talking about for 2 years now.
Right, absolutely right. Okay, well, thank you on that. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Early in the fall, you all, or maybe late summer, you approved an instructional coach role, and we've had that advertised for quite a while. We in total received 4 applicants. One of them withdrew. There are people in the pool that I'm excited about, but I'm not totally comfortable moving forward right now. So I know folks were wondering where we are with that. I'm exploring, because it's also sort of bad form to pull people out of other school districts in the middle of the year, because then they can't fill the role, and ourselves we're struggling with staffing. I'm exploring the possibility of reposting it in February for next year, so we could get somebody with lots of advance notice, and I think that'll also increase the candidate pool. And then filling the role with a contracted service or a consultant. So that's not pulling an existing person out of a school, but somebody who does a few hours a week in each of several schools to potentially do this. The other role could be a retired person to work as an instructional coach. Questions about that? That's really largely an update. Anyone? One other thing, you know, we do a lot of stuff with the Great Schools Partnership. So there are now 3 folks from there who are working with us. Dan Liebert is probably the one that people know the most. They've been giving us some advice around how to define the role, which I think will be helpful. So if we bring in a consultant to do the work in the short term, not only will they do the work and model it, but they'll help us set up the position in a way so when we bring somebody on, that person can be more successful. Okay, so I think that's That's it for me, and back to Steve.
Subcommittee reports policy is not met, they will. Jason, buildings and grounds?
Yeah, we met on, October 26th. Just had one topic, high school extraordinary funds. We were fortunate to have Chrissy present to us her thoughts and plans on how to spend that money in the budget. So briefly, Christy, do you want me to sum it up for you?
If you could, that'd be wonderful.
Okay. So, basically, the use of space in the academic areas has been great, and there's really no more minor or low-hanging fruit projects left for the classrooms. They're about as good as we can get, unless we put some serious money that we don't have going forward. So, which is a good thing, you know, which the money that we've used these last 5 or 6 years has really been great in updating those classrooms. So the next step, as far as, you know, the majority of the classrooms, the academic wing, et cetera, is starting to replace some of the furniture. There's still a lot of sled desks there to get rid of those, and there's new trapezoid desks that are, I guess, a lot better for multiple reasons. Some more whiteboards, tablets, et cetera. So that's number one. Number two, the bathrooms, the northeast bathrooms, which is on the bus loading platform closest to the fields that get used for sporting events, as well as basically the A-wing students. You know, those are obviously in horrible shape and they need a facelift. So, you know, she proposed that as well. The other thing was the auditorium seating. It's gotten past the point of no return. A lot of the seating is unacceptable at this point. So I know Steve Soul said about 5 years ago it was about $120,000 range estimate to do them all. Obviously, that's probably doubled or tripled now, considering the way that our economy is since then. But at least to get a portion to start on that, to replace some of those, especially the ones that are, you know, can't be used anymore, just unacceptable. So that was another portion of the money that she proposed. The last thing was the outdoor classroom space. To right now, we basically just have a bunch of wooden tables out there, but to have something more formal, almost like a curved dugout into the excavated into the earth, and almost like a performance venue, but more of a what's the word I'm looking for?
Amphitheater.
Yeah, amphitheater kind of look to be used. So those are really the 4 main points she touched on. Anybody else there want to add anything or anything I forgot?
Anything else, Jason?
And I know that was there. That was the only topic discussion.
Was there seating outside, seating in hallways or something, seating like to make alcoves or?
The library benches?
So
Library, outside the library benches.
across from the library, there's lockers, and that's a place where we talked about, like we did the back alcove, right outside of the gymnasium. And then outside of the auditorium was another area that we thought we could actually benefit from having some seating there, and there's lockers that are not being used.
So wasn't that one of the other things?
Yeah, well, Steve said that he could get that up as a budget. That would be necessary for the extraordinary funds. He thought his guys could do it in-house, part of his regular budget, so. And then also, I mean, she touched on the early childhood, moving to chapter 74, so we need to update that, but again, that's gonna be grant funded. It's not necessary to use these specific funds, so that's kind of why I goes off, but, yeah.
Thanks, Jason. Superintendent's evaluation? Technology? We did meet. Do you want to?
Yeah, no, I'll talk about it. So we had a really nice meeting, and we put together a bunch of thoughtful slides that I can share with. I'll put it in the folder for everything. He's working hard in like 5 different areas. So network stuff and continuing to update devices, all sorts of complex software that should let people learn, and the rest of us do our jobs better. The refresh cycle is moving ahead. There was a real, and I think this was going into the pandemic, everybody ordered everything under the sun, and Chromebooks took, like that combined with the shipping issues, Chromebooks took 6 months to almost a year to get, and we've got it now finally. A lot of the stuff we ordered, and are ordering more stuff, and getting that. Some discussion about they're doing a lot on sort of the hardware network side of things, and in individual buildings, there are tech teams that are working really hard around supporting technology shifts and innovation. But a thing to think about on our list of opportunities is again, sort of more support and professional development and connections around technology. Steve, did I miss anything?
I don't think so. It was a good meeting.
Yeah, and it was nice because we hadn't had one in a little while.
Rich, finance?
Yeah, we met actually before this meeting tonight and reviewed the kind of overview summary of the high school and the elementary school, both which were very well done and informative. Nothing dramatically earth-shattering from a financial budgetary impact. Christy did give us a good update on where they're going with the CVTE program, kind of post-COVID. And we should, expect some budgetary impacts there, but I think it'll be well done. So we're meeting again. I forget what the specific date is, in a couple weeks, but we should be moving more into nuts and bolts budget composition stuff now. So that's
Next one's at 5:00.
Okay, thank you.
District consolidation and sharing has not met. Anything, very short personnel report, anything you want to highlight?
No.
Any old or new business before the committee?
Can I know it's late, but I've been thinking about this. I was interviewed this morning by a student at Monument Mountain who's writing for Maroon Tribune, whatever the name of the newspaper is. For journalism, and he wanted me to deal with the school rehabilitation and renovation project. And I gave him my insight on it, and I want to know, where are we on getting on the road to the high school project? I know we haven't heard from the MSBA, but we had a meeting in last spring in which we talked about we want to be ready to go when the MSBA comes down with either a yes or a no. Either way, we want to be on the road. So I'd like to know, where are we in regards to looking at consultants? Are we even to that point? I know with COVID, and I understand why, if we haven't gotten there, I think I understand it, but it came up that we're going to return Great Barrington $400,000 from E&D surplus, over $400,000 according to Sharon's report. And I talked to somebody this morning and said there's some good use of that money to be put aside for a high school project, and that the town should start preparing for this. So I don't know whether this is the project.
We'll put it on the agenda for the next meeting. That's not on the agenda.
Okay.
We'll put it on the agenda.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to talk about it then.
Good, okay.
Absolutely.
Everyone should read the vote we took last May, and I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I'd love to talk about it at the next meeting too, but if I would also be open to another joint finance committee buildings and grounds meeting on that specific topic if people wanted it.
Sounds good, Rich.
Yep.
Anyone else? Any public comment? Go ahead. Erica?
Thank you. I was wondering how easy it is, or what the process is to look at an existing contract. It's come up in some of the inclusion work that it would be helpful to see what the contract between the district and Stowe Collective actually said.
Public comment.
I think it's a public
It's a
document.
public
All
document.
our documents.
Yeah, just make a request to the superintendent's office.
Okay, is there an official form or can I just?
You're asking me. I'll send it to you tomorrow.
Okay, great. I'll shoot you an email, Peter. I would love to see that contract. Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else? By unanimous consent, we are adjourned.
Thanks.